Hello everyone. Today I wanted to take the time to film like a complete list of all of the gear that I had, plus a little review about each piece of gear. I have decided to break this down into like 3 different sections. First is all the gear that I started with. Second will be all the gear changes that I made. And then third would be gear choices that I would make if I could do it all over again. So not necessarily gear regrets, but there's a couple things that I carried with me that I would have done differently, and I thought I would just share that with you guys. So getting started with things that I brought with me, the original gear that I had started with, and I'm going to start with clothing. All right, so for clothing, starting with just hiking clothes. So this is a Smart Wool brand t-shirt that I did my entire hike in. I loved this shirt. It's great because it doesn't hold on to odor. And when you're not washing your clothes for days at a time and you're not showering for days at a time, it's really nice to have a piece of gear that doesn't smell. So highly recommend. Loved this shirt. Would do it again in a heartbeat. And it held up pretty well. I have a couple holes in it in like the armpits, but I thought otherwise it held up really great. Very, very happy with it. Next up, I hiked in just a regular pair of athletic shorts that I would use for like running at home. Nothing fancy or special. And then I had just a regular pair of leggings that I wore from home. These are another pair of leggings that I just already had for just like running at home. And I didn't buy anything special for the trail. I just already had these. Okay, so then for layering, I had a alpaca gear hoodie that I wore. Unfortunately, it didn't make it through the trip, but I loved my alpaca hoodie. I kept it, I think, until Vermont, and I only got rid of it because it just had too many holes in it. It just didn't hold up well from the abrasion of the pack against the fabric, but I loved that piece of gear. I would buy it again and highly recommend it. Yeah, but I don't have it here with me to show because I threw it away in Vermont. But next up for layering is my puppy. I used the Enlighten Equipment Torrid coat. I did size up on the coat so that I could easily layer under it. I don't regret that at all, but I think that probably you don't need to size up. I think it was already a little bit big to begin with. But yes, loved this coat. It packs down really, really small. It's very light, and I wore it all the time. Loved it. It held up really well. No concerns. And then I would hike in just a normal sports bra. Again, nothing special that I bought. And normal underwear. I think I used the brand Ex Officio, but it was great. No concerns at all with any of my hiking clothes. I loved them all. Really good choices. So moving on to sleeping clothes. Again, I didn't buy special gear for this. I just shopped my own closet from what I had at home. But this is just a pair of fleece-lined leggings that I wore for running in the wintertime at home. I think they're from Kohl's. And then I just used, again, a fleece-lined warm running shirt. And I just picked something that was warm from my closet and not super heavy. Again, these were great. I also use these as my town clothes. So I interchanged sleeping clothes with town clothes because those are my cleanest clothes. And then for sleeping, I had a pair of just wool socks, nothing special. These are from Eddie Bauer. And I had these Enlightened Equipment down booties, and I loved these. One of my favorite pieces of gear. They just kept my feet so toasty warm, and I loved them. I carried them until New Hampshire. Carried them for a long time, so really loved these. And then because this was also my town clothes, I just had, again, another sports bra from home. I also had a buff. This is a wool buff, and I used it mostly while sleeping at night to keep my head warm while I was sleeping. A few times I did hike in it, and it was really great. I carried it for a long time, and it worked really well. A pair of gloves. Again, these are just from REI. I got them a couple years ago. These are supposed to be waterproof. They worked fine. I didn't use them often. I think I just used them like maybe once while sleeping when it was really a cold night, and once when hiking in the rain. But they worked great. For actually hiking in, I had a pair of Injinji socks, which are the toe socks that separate your toes, and a pair of Darn Tough wool socks. I went through many pairs of each of these. I should have counted, but I'll say 4 or 5 pairs of each throughout the trail. Highly worth it. I was able to exchange my Darn Toughs sometimes. They have a lifetime guarantee on their socks. So I was able at certain locations to just exchange them for free, which was really nice. Otherwise, I just bought a new pair as I needed them. And then for rain, I have my raincoat. This is a coat that I've had for like 6 or 7 years. It's just a really lightweight coat from Eddie Bauer. I thought about getting a new raincoat before heading out on the trip, and I thought, well, I'll just start with this coat, and if it doesn't work well, I'll buy a new one. And it worked fine. I kind of realized that no raincoat is really perfect. You're gonna get wet eventually, like from either prolonged rain that just eventually seeps through the coat, or when you're wearing the coat, you just sweat a lot in it, and so you're gonna get wet from sweat. So this coat was fine. I had it on hand and it worked. Just a regular hat that I mostly used when it was raining, just to keep the hood from the raincoat off my face. And then sometimes I would use it when it was sunny out, just to protect my face from the sun. And then the camp shoes that I started with were Crocs. They worked really well. I carried them for a long time. And then the shoes that I hiked in, these ones are Ultra Lone Peaks. This is what I ended the hike in. I switched shoes a lot. I never found a pair that I was totally satisfied with. So I just kind of started buying whatever shoes were available when I needed a new pair. So these are Ultra Lone Peaks. I also wore Ultra Timps, and I wore Topo Athletic Ultra Venture 3s. So those were the shoes that I went through. None of them were awesome, but thankfully I didn't have a lot of feet issues, so I was able to kind of just switch from brand to brand, pair to pair. Some people really have to be specific about the exact shoe that they wear and the exact insoles that they wear, but thankfully I was able to just kind of swap between different types of shoes with no real issues. So I think that does it for the clothing. Next I'm going to bring out the rest of my gear. Great, so next up is my pack. I started with the Gossamer Gear Mariposa 60-liter pack. This pack was really great. I definitely enjoyed having it. It worked really well for about the first half of my trip, and I did end up switching packs, and I'll explain a little bit why later. But a couple of things that were really great about this pack. This is the front pocket, and it was mesh, so I could like expand it, fit lots of things in here. I would sometimes put my entire tent in here when it was wet. It fit my Crocs really well up in here, and things were like very easily accessible from this pocket. It has a really large side pocket. It's actually meant to put a tent in the side pocket, but my tent didn't fit in it. But it was great in the cold season. I would actually put my puffy coat in here, and that was really nice to have it accessible. And then over here are two small pockets. I would put my water bottle in this pocket, and then my water filtration in this one. And then it had hip belt pockets. Oh, and there was a top pocket here too. I would put my trowel and my toilet paper in this top pouch. So really good pack. It worked well for when I did use it. But on the pack, I also had this phone pouch. I put my phone in the main compartment and my headphones in this little compartment. Carried this the entire trip. And then a water bottle pouch. I kept my small water bottle in here. Also on my pack was a Garmin InReach. This is a much bigger InReach than needed, but it was actually loaned to me by one of my cousins. So free is good. These are really expensive originally. So I carried this the entire trip. I almost never used it. I barely ever turned it on, but it was so nice to know that I had it. I had the subscription plan as well, so that I could text with it and use this SOS button if needed. Thankfully, I never needed it. And then also on my pack was a little thing of hand sanitizer that I just kept hanging on my pack for easy access. Now I'll talk about my food. I used a jet boil. This is the Micro Mo. It has like a little cup at the bottom, which doubles as a measuring cup. Really liked this. No concerns at all. The actual stove is kept inside, and it was great. I really liked that the outside was insulated and that it had a handle. It worked really well. I've had the stove for years. I didn't buy it specifically for the Appalachian Trail, but it's one that I used on previous trips, and I knew how to use it, and it was good. Next up is a little tiny thing of fuel. I always got the smallest one, 100 grams. It was good. I had a collapsible cup. It worked really well. For the very few times that I made myself hot coffee, I appreciated this. A lighter. I did not get a mini Bic. I just got this lighter, a regular size, because it's what I had. And this one lighter lasted me the entire trip. A spork. This is a titanium spork that I got at REI. It was good, very lightweight. And then just a regular bandana, just to keep my kitchen things clean, to wipe off my utensils. This is a Z-Packs bear bag. I use this for the majority of the trip to store my food. And then this is a bear line and a rucksack used to hang the food. So the line, I think it's like 50 yards, 50 feet. I'm not sure, but worked great. No issues with this equipment. Lastly, I got this on Etsy. This is a insulated food bag that you can put meals inside of. I actually brought a lot of my own homemade backpacking meals. And I would use this to help keep the bag warm while rehydrating. This worked really well. I loved it. Yeah, worked good. That's really it for the kitchen setup. That was basically what I carried, except for a few changes that I'll show later. Okay, so next up will be the electronics section. So I used my iPhone for all of my navigation, for just normal iPhone use. And that's also what I used to film and vlog the whole trail. Then I had this Z-Packs bag. It's a little dry bag that will fold down and clip. And I kept all of my other electronics in here. Towards the end of the trip, when it rained all of the time, I put all of my extra electronics in a little Ziploc bag that I added to this just for another layer of protection because things were getting wet. I started with Aftershok's headphones. I like these a lot for everyday use at home because they don't affect your hearing. Like, you can still hear what's going on around you in addition to your music or whatever you're listening to. So I started the trail with these, but they didn't make it more than 40 miles, I think, before I sent them home. This is one of my chargers. So these are the headphones that I actually ended up using. This is just the free pair of headphones that come with an iPhone. And they worked great. A lot of people did end up using the wireless headphones of some sort. And I think if I were to do it over again, I probably would not have sent these home, or I would have gotten a pair of AirPods or another type of wireless headphone. Just because after a while, these get annoying. The string gets annoying. But I made it work. It was fine. I also had an Anker 20 milliamp power bank. This was good. It worked well. Really had very few issues. I had an Anker brand wall charger that I would plug. These are 2 USB ports. Really no issues with this one. And then my numerous chargers. I have my phone charger, my watch charger, and a micro USB. And then the last piece of electronics would be my watch. This is a Garmin Forerunner watch. I never used it though to record workouts. I just used it for the time, the day of the week, and the day of the month. Which, you know, is important because when you're in the woods every day, you forget what day it is. So that's what I use this for. The battery was awesome. It takes like 8 days before you need to charge it again. I only ever needed to charge it when I was in town. It was great. Next up will be water filtration. I used the Katadyn Be Free filter. I think I went through 3 of these on the trip. And then I used a CNOC 2-liter bag that was the wider head here for the Katadyn filter to fit in. I thought this was the perfect setup. I carried 2 smart water bottles, a 1 liter and a 700 milliliter. And then I could also fill up this bag with 2 liters of like unfiltered or dirty water. And I did that. Like, there were stretches in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New York where I would have to go longer miles in between water sources. And so I would have my 2 smart water bottles filled with water, and then I would carry 2 liters in this bag. So this was a great setup. Wouldn't change anything about this. Talking about a couple other miscellaneous gear pieces. I carried this towel to dry off my tent if it was wet in the morning or if it was dirty. I would use this to like dry my feet if they were wet all day before I like would go to bed. This was just kind of a multi-purpose towel. This is a neck knife that you can carry around your neck. You can put it around your neck. I never, though, put it around my neck. I really only used this knife when I brought a block of cheese in my food bag. I would use this knife to cut that. Next up is my wallet. This is a Z-Packs wallet. It's made of Dyneema, so it's mostly waterproof. In here, I carried a credit card, a debit card, my driver's license, cash. I had a little journal that I thought I would use more than I did. I did take some notes, but didn't use it much. A pen and some postcard stamps for when I sent postcards out to home. I think that's all I put in here. And then for toiletries, I just kind of had a bag, a Ziploc bag that I use to carry a whole bunch of random things. I have in here a hairbrush, a razor, body glide, glasses with extra contacts. I have Band-Aids, chapstick, vitamins and medicine like Tylenol and ibuprofen. I think that's all the medicine I carried. I have a patch kit for my sleeping pad. Trying to see if there's anything else in here. A little tiny pair of scissors. At one point I carried a needle and thread. I kept that in here. Band-Aids. Extra hair ties. I think that's it. So just put it all in one bag. And then for bathroom, I had a Deuce of Spades trowel, a little bag of toilet paper, and a Kula cloth. And I think that's it for things that went inside my pack, except for my sleep setup. So that will be next. So now we have the sleep setup. First of all, I have the Thermarest Neo Air X-Lite sleeping mat. This is one of the yellow ones. They're really popular on trail. You see them a lot. And this is actually a short length pad. It goes to my knees or even maybe a little bit higher. I think it's like the torso length. I think that's what they call it. And it's like the older model of Thermarest. They've updated it since then. I don't even think you can buy this one anymore. This was great. I used it for the first half of my trip. The only reason why I got rid of it was because it had a leak. And I will talk about that later when I talk about gear changes. I'm not gonna try to put this away right now. Next up is my quilt. I used the Enlightened Equipment Revelation Quilt 20-degree bag. This is one of my very favorite pieces of gear. I loved it. It unzips fully, so it's kind of like a blanket, completely unzipped, or you can zip up the foot box and then it cinches closed so that it turns kind of more into like a sleeping bag looking system. It straps to the inflatable ear mats, and once you know how to use a quilt, Like once you know how to correctly cinch down the straps, and it's very warm. It's wonderful. Love this. Love a lightened equipment. For a pillow, I just used a Gossamer Gear stuff sack, and I stuffed whatever clothing I had left over into this. So in the summer months, I had a great pillow because I would stick my puffy and my mid layer in here, and it was really nice. But in the winter months, when I was sleeping with those layers, it was a little bit lacking. But personally, the inflatable camp pillows, I have several I've tried in the past. I never found them to be comfortable no matter what I did. So a stuff sack works great for me. No problems with that. And then not lastly, but close to last, is my tent. I have the Z-Pax Duplex, and I loved this tent. It was awesome. It worked so well. I never really had major condensation issues. I learned that if you set up like in a grassy field with like no trees above you, you're gonna have more condensation. But if you set up in the woods, under trees, which is mostly what you do on the AT, condensation issues are not as bad. I had very few issues with the tent leaking, like with like rain or anything like that. And the only times that I had an issue with that were when I didn't have a good setup, because I had to like put my I had to set up my tent in like a not ideal location, and I knew it. Love this tent. Would not hesitate to recommend Z-Pax for their tents. For trekking poles, I had the Gossamer Gear trekking poles. They're very lightweight. I loved them. I used them to set up my tent, so it was really important to have trekking poles, not just for hiking, but also to set up my tent with. I never had any issues with like the tips falling off of these or breaking any sections of the trekking poles. This one pair lasted me the whole trip, and I'm not sure that a lot of people can say that. I think a lot of people have to replace either part of their trekking poles or the entire trekking pole. But I had these worked really well for me. And then lastly, this is just a bag liner that I used to stuff all of my clothing and sleep items in. I put this in the bottom of my bag, put my items in here that I wanted to make sure stayed dry, and then rolled this down, put it in my pack. These are like 2 for $5 on Gossamer Gear, and they worked great. I did have to replace it a couple of times throughout the trip. Before I left, I bought an extra pack of these and had them at home, and then when I needed a new one, I would just have one sent out to me. Worked well. Yeah, it was good. All right, so that's all of the gear that I started with that I have to show you, but there are a couple other pieces of gear that I started with that I just no longer have. One is my headlamp. I started with a black diamond headlamp that took actual AAA batteries. Before leaving on the trip, the headlamp wasn't working that well. I had accidentally left batteries in it that corroded. I tried cleaning it out, and I brought that headlamp with me, and it lasted for a really long time, but it didn't last the whole trip. And I ended up throwing that headlamp away because it was broken. And then I also had a Gossamer Gear 1/8 inch foam mat that I used to put under my sleeping pad when I slept like in the shelter or in the tent. It was just a pad that helped create a barrier for my sleeping pad to keep things a little bit more clean and to protect my sleeping pad. But unfortunately, I lost that sleeping pad in the 100-mile wilderness. I was set up on a beautiful cliff watching the sunset. I walked away to get my dinner stuff, and the sleeping pad blew right off the cliff, never to be seen again. So that made it for a really long time. and I lost it just in the last few days of the trip. And that's it, I think, for all of the gear that I started with. So next up, I'm going to show the gear changes that I made and explain why I made them. All right, so first up, I thought I would share gear that I just sent home because I realized I either didn't need it anymore or I wasn't using it enough to justify carrying it. So start with the headphones that I already mentioned, the Trex Aftershock headphones. Just sent these home, started with them, sent them home. After a while, I got rid of my sleeping socks. I realized that I didn't need them anymore once it got spring and got a little bit warmer. So these went home pretty quickly after a couple 100 miles. My wool buff went home probably about halfway through the trip. I just realized that I wasn't wearing it anymore. I wasn't using it. It was just warm enough. I didn't need it. Also, my gloves went home after a few 100 miles. Again, I wasn't using them enough to justify carrying them anymore. And the down booties went home last of all. These didn't come home until I went home myself in July for my back issues. Then I got rid of these. When I was home for my back pain, I also got rid of my collapsible cup. I wasn't using it. I got rid of, not the stove, I just got rid of this part of the stove. And I got rid of the food insulator bag. Once it was warm outside, I just realized I didn't need this anymore. So I just left it home when I came home in July. So that's it for gear that I just got rid of without really replacing. So next up will be gear changes that I made because I was replacing it for something else. So I'm trying to do this in order of the trail because that's just how it makes sense in my head, and I feel like that's the easiest way for me to stay organized. So first up, around mile 70, I bought another pair of pants to sleep in. This was just a thicker pair of leggings. It got really cold outside. I actually layered up and wore 2 pair of leggings for a while. This is when temps were into like the 20s and teens at night. I didn't use this system very long. Eventually I sent home the first pair of leggings that I brought with me and kept this pair for a while. But that was just purely because it was so cold outside. I realized I had a lot of top layers. I had my mid layer and my puffy coat. I had a lot of feet layers with my socks and my down booties, but I didn't have a lot of layers for my pants. I just picked up another one. Next up, I added a Hyperlight fanny pack. I added this before the Smoky Mountains. I picked this up at the NOC, the Nantahala Outdoor Center. It was great. I started putting all of my snacks in the inside pocket. I ended up keeping my wallet in the inside pocket as well. In the front pocket, I kept my little pair of scissors that I brought and a little thing of hand sanitizer. And then in this back pocket, I put my trash that I would accumulate throughout the day. And this was such a great addition. Before even starting the trail, I had thought maybe I would want a fanny pack. And I realized very quickly that I did want one. This was a piece of gear I picked up quickly. Next up, I don't actually have the sleeping bag liner, but this is the bag for it. And it's the Sea to Summit Reactor bag. I loved this thing. Again, it was colder than I realized it was gonna be. So this paired with my 20-degree bag was perfect. I carried this sleeping bag liner for about 2 months, and it wasn't mine. So the younger Dave Squared was carrying this. It was his, and he was gonna send it home because he didn't think he needed it. and I was gonna buy one, the same exact one. And so I just started carrying his, and it was great. So he has it now, but I need to return the bag to him still. So I'll do that soon. All right, and then the next piece of gear change that I made was getting a new sleeping mat. Right before Harper's Ferry, I noticed that my sleeping mat was going flat on me while I was sleeping, and so I was able to get a new one. I didn't want to mess with having to patch the sleeping mat on trail, so I got this new one, and it is the Thermarest Neo Air X Lite, the NMT, I think it is. This is the newest version of the Thermarest. They don't make the short ones that just go to your knees, so I got a full length mat, which is really great. No complaints or concerns about this. It worked super well, and I'm really happy that I have it. Next up, I just exchanged my winter sleeping clothes for summer sleeping clothes. So I sent home my warm leggings and my warm long sleeve shirt, and I just carried a pair of athletic shorts that I already had at home. And then I picked up in Harper's Ferry an AT t-shirt that I liked. Again, very lightweight. This is cotton. I never hiked in it that I can think of, but I would use it just for camp and for town. Another gear change that I made is I swapped out my Crocs for flip-flops. These flip-flops were from Dollar Tree, and they worked well for what they are. They're lightweight and cheap, and they're not bulky like Crocs. They worked well. In Vermont, I had to get rid of my alpaca gear hoodie that I loved so much. And in one of the gear shops, I picked up this Arc'teryx zip-up hoodie. And I really love it, and I've continued to wear it at home because I love it so much. Lightweight and durable. It worked really well. So next up are some bigger items that I exchanged. When I went home in July for the back pain, I ended up getting a new pack. So this is the Hyperlite pack. It's a 55 liter, and I got it for a couple of reasons. The biggest problem that I had with my Mariposa from Gossamer Gear was the hip belt. I lost some weight on the trail, and the hip belt no longer fit me. It was completely cinched, and still it was a little bit loose around the waist, and that just caused my continued upper back pain. It just didn't help the whole situation. So I decided that I wanted to get a new pack to finish out the trail. I loved this pack. I got the small hip belt instead of the medium that my other pack was. Another reason why I got this pack specifically is because it's made from Dyneema material, which is a waterproof material, and it worked really well. The only thing that's not completely waterproof would be the seams. So like where the shoulder straps are sewn in, and all the seams in the pack are not completely waterproof. They do seam seal the pack, and I never had any issues with the pack leaking. But I only carried this pack for 400 miles, the last 400 miles of the trip. Very much love this pack and will use it on future trips. It worked really well. All right, next up, when I was home, I swapped to this headlamp, the Petzl Bindi headlamp. I got this one because it's super lightweight and it's rechargeable with a micro USB, and it worked really well. No concerns. The last gear change that I made was getting a Bear canister. So this is a Bear Vault canister. I don't know the size offhand. It's the largest one that they sell at REI. I got this beer canister for a few reasons. The first reason is that Dave Squared hung my food for me basically every single night, which was super, super kind of him. And I just didn't have a lot of confidence that I would be able to correctly hang my food by myself. I think I would have been just fine hanging my food by myself, except that I was having so much back pain when I went home that I wasn't sure that I could physically like throw the rock sack. So I got the beer canister just so I didn't have to worry about it. It was really great for what I used it for. It is heavy. There are pros and cons for sure to having a beer canister. I can tell you that I prefer to just have a regular beer bag and hang it. That's definitely a lighter approach, and it just fits in the pack better. But I'm glad I had this for the last 400 miles of my trip. I think that's it for all of the gear changes that I made. But I would like to talk about a couple of things that I would do differently if I were starting all over with buying new gear. So I was really happy with my gear. I spent hours and hours researching it. I watched tons of gear videos, just like the one that I'm making right now. I put a lot of effort into it, and I'm really, really pleased with my gear. I really wouldn't change anything that I did for myself, but if I were starting all over with buying gear, or if I had never bought gear before, there are a few things that I carried that I just wouldn't recommend anymore, either because there's like a newer version out now, or just because I think there's something that's a little bit better that I would change. So first up would be my stove, my Jetboil. When I got this stove, they did not have the Jetboil stash out yet. And I think if I were to start all over again, I would not recommend this exact one. This is the Micro Mo. I would instead recommend the stash. I think it just fits things better. Like, you can store the fuel canister inside the stove. I think it just works better for thru hiking or for backpacking in general. I would not carry this Garmin InReach anymore. I am so thankful that I had this. Again, it was free for me to use, and that means a lot. But I would get the Garmin InReach Mini. That's what basically every other thru hiker that carried a Garmin had. I would carry a Garmin. This gave me a lot of peace of mind. It helped my family feel comfortable with me being out on trail. I'm very, very thankful for this technology and equipment. But the Mini, I think, is worth the investment just for the less weight. I would also change my camp shoe situation. So I started with the Crocs. I progressed to the cheap flip-flops. The Crocs were great, except for they're really bulky and a little bit heavy. The flip-flops are super flimsy. They worked fine until I got to Maine and I had water crossings. Lots and lots of water crossings. And these were the sandals that I had. So there's no back to these, there's no traction. And so I really was left with no choice but to go through the water crossings with my regular hiking shoes. If I had a really lightweight sandal that was about the size of the flip-flops but had a backing, I would have preferred that. And I think if I were starting all over, I would just start with a really lightweight backpacking sandal, like the Zero brand shoe. I think that would just have been easier to deal with from the very beginning. And then the last piece of gear change that I would make is not carrying a beer canister. I don't regret carrying it, but this beer canister did not fit well in my pack. I was in a rush when I bought this. I was home for just 6 days and I was trying to get everything that I needed to get back out on trail. And I didn't realize when I bought this that it would only fit vertically in the pack, not horizontally. And I think this would have been significantly better if it would have fit in my pack on its side. So I would have gotten one that was just a hair smaller, the small next size down, or even they make them in different brands that you can even get custom sizing. I didn't have time to do anything custom. I only had to carry this for 400 miles, but I would make sure if I had a bear canister that it fit horizontally. I would not ever take one out again that would only fit in my pack vertically. That ended up being a really big hassle. Again, I could deal with it, but it wasn't ideal. All right, I think that's it for all of the gear that I have brought with me on the Appalachian Trail. I hope you guys found this useful and helpful. I know that I love to watch gear videos. I still watch them even though I have accumulated all of the gear that I need. Yes, so hopefully this was helpful, and stay tuned. I do have other videos planned, some post-hike videos, and then just some general life update videos. So stay tuned. There's more coming for this channel, and thank you guys again for all the support that you've given me.